Having a good relationship with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing. Only stupid people or fools would think it is bad. He's conceded that China or Russia, others are hacking. He seems to be holding this thing with Putin and with Russia to keep that.
Sure. Well, I should also say this by point of introduction. During my years at the New York Times, the first beat I covered was the CIA. So I had a fair amount of experience meeting and thinking about and sometimes criticizing the people who do this work. I still keep up with some of them. They're dumbfounded. I mean, the people in American intelligence are dumbfounded by this sort of pure narcissism. You're tarnishing my victory. There doesn't seem to be any great political benefit to this. There's an enormous downside. I mean, one of the things I think that's striking about all this is that in America, after all, they were wrong on WMD. Let's just be, for a moment, clear about what that incident really was about. I mean, that was about a president who had a policy viewpoint. Iraq is linked to 9/11. We need to punish Iraq for their links to terrorism. That viewpoint was not really sustainable in the evidence. Ultimately, they produced what we now know to be a very fallacious report that Colin Powell delivered at the UN. It's one of the great dishonorable moments in American intelligence history. But it's about the president saying what the right answer is. And now we have a president who, before he's even elected, is basically telling the intelligence community, when it comes to Russia, this is the right answer. You know, they're not a threat. We need to work with them. I don't want to hear any of this negative stuff. So, I mean, I think from a sort of policy level, it is incomprehensible. I think from the sort of substantive level, I mean, a good relationship with Russia, what does that mean? I mean, if you look at sort of Putin's very clever strategy to destabilize the European alliance, to flex his muscles in the Middle East, good and bad aren't the words you want to use about this relationship. It's a realpolitik question of who projects power where, and where Russian interests are being advanced. And I got to say, I'm just dumbfounded. I don't know, Jonathan?
Well, first of all, you suggested that it tipped the election. It just, in interest of clarity, the report from the intelligence community does not say that. But in an election that was determined by less than 1/20th of 1% of 135 million votes, everything potentially affected the election. So even though we'll never know for sure whether this did, it certainly very possibly could have had an impact. But I was struck by a comparison I saw to Watergate. Who cares whether it affected the election in terms of its importance for our national security now? You know, in 1973, after the 72 election, where Nixon won 49 states, Nixon, for all the idiotic lie-filled arguments he made, never said, well, the break-in didn't affect the election.
Right.
I would have won anyway. Right? Nobody ever made that argument then, because it's a totally irrelevant argument. It's a great example of what Joe Biden calls Trump's instinctive genius for being able to change the subject, deflect attention with a shiny object so that everybody moves off onto some other angle. A couple of years ago, there was a flap because the U.S. was spying on all of our allies. We were spying on Angela Merkel. And if you went over to Waldorf, every room in the hotel was bugged. Because everybody's spying on everybody else all the time. I've been for years. So I wasn't like scandalized that this happened. What really upset me was the reaction when we learned that this had happened, where our politics is now so tribal that people are willing to put their party ahead of their country. And so if our guys say this is no big deal, and that we're supposed to be friends with Russia, then suddenly we're Putin's best friends, even if we used to hate Putin. Now they say that the same thing's true of the liberals in reverse, but it's not like liberals a couple of years ago were like pro-Putin and are now anti-Putin. The flip was on the conservative side. We saw people going from considering Russia to be a serious threat to beyond rationalizations of Russia, with some exceptions like Lindsey Graham and John McCain. And we'll see whether, as the hearings unfold, depending on what comes out, whether there are more exceptions as time goes on. The big question for journalists is about Trump and why, in a world where he has nothing nice to say, not only about any Democrats and Republicans and world leaders, there's only one person he has consistently had nice things to say about in the last 2 years. Literally one person in the entire world outside of his immediate family, and that person's name is Vladimir Putin. So you have
left one out. He also does like the guy in the Philippines.
Who shoots drug dealers. Okay, he likes him too. So, but it does raise the question of why. And I think that's something that a lot of reporters have been chasing for some time. They don't have an answer to yet.
So what is the, just tease out further, what is the Trump doctrine? I know there's contradictory tweets, there's phone calls, there's...
What makes me look good?
Yeah.
Well, I think
is there a pragmatist?
I think it might be
pragmatist?
a little bit more than that. But I want to back up to one thing Jonathan said, because I think it's worth sort of teasing out a little bit more what we're talking about in this Russian thing. John's absolutely right that countries, including the United States, have long taken opportunities to meddle in other people's elections. I mean, this is not a new thought in the world of intelligence operations. And, you do that in different ways. And the CIA did, back in the 50s and 60s, used to have certain compliant journalists who would plant stories. And that tradition went on into they stopped using American journalists after the Church Committee hearings, but they continued to use foreign journalists to plant false or misleading stories and sometimes even fabricated documents in the press of foreign countries in the 80s and 90s. I think what we see here, though, and this is important, is that the ability to hack the chairman of the Clinton campaign committee's emails and then release every day hundreds, maybe thousands of emails into the internet and to create a daily story which drives the campaign narrative. This is a new phenomenon of the world of WikiLeaks plus hacked emails and intelligence operations equals something new. And interestingly, I did a sort of thought experiment. I said, what would, Mitt Romney have said under these circumstances? And I think, honestly, Mitt Romney would have issued a statement the day this was clear, saying, I, like my colleagues in the Democratic Party, are horrified at the notion of a foreign intelligence service monkeying around. We need to get to the bottom of this. We need to figure out what's happened. And this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is a bipartisan question of the integrity of our elections. If it could happen to the Democrats this time, it could happen to us the next time. That seems like the sort of thing any president previous would have said.
Exactly. So this is a great example of how Trump is out of bounds. I mean, there's a football game going on. What he does is he takes the ball and he charges out of bounds, and he hits the cheerleaders and people on the sidelines and everybody in his way, and then the next play he charges out of bounds again. So the question is,
it's the referee.
It's the referee, attacks the referee, denounces the referee. So the question is, what are we in the media going to do about it? And so far, with some shining exceptions and some excellent work that was done last fall and continues to be done, on this particular point, we failed miserably by seeing the substance of these released emails, which were so uneventful. I mean, there was nothing in John Podesta's recipe for risotto. There was no news in these things, but every day they were turned into news because one aide nobody had heard of had something critical to say about another aide nobody had heard of, and it was catnip for lazy reporters and lazy news organizations. I hate to be harsh on colleagues, but a lot of this was not news. Meanwhile, in the FBI, they have this, this huge thing going on, which they know about, and yet they choose to focus on Hillary Clinton's emails. And that, I think, was more decisive in this election.
Now, to go back to your question, which I think was a good question, I didn't mean to get us off track there. Trump doctrine. Look, it's very early days. You wrote an entire book on the first 100 days of Roosevelt. I don't know.
Obama's first.
I don't know if the first 100 days Trump are going to measure up, but who knows? They might. And I think on one level you do see a sort of game plan that seems to be there. The sort of notion that all relationships, political, international, and so on, are transactional, and then by blustering and pressuring, and it worked very well for him in business, you know, threatening not to pay, you can get a better deal. And I think that's seemingly the conversation that we're having, which does lead us to, I think, a fascinating moment in the coverage of business in the government. With this guy, and I think it's becoming quite clear, you want to provide a concrete example that his theory of the world, that you can get a better deal, actually works. And so, why hire a lobbyist if you're a carrier? Why have a PAC? Just announce that he's persuaded you to save 800 jobs, right? Giving him that, and that's your political operation. And so if that's where we're headed, that this is his worldview and that's how he executes it, then there's a whole new species of investigative reporting that I think has to come up, which becomes the same kind of thing we would do with a lobbyist or a PAC contribution, which is to what extent do these things push or sway the policy from what it should be, so the carrier gives 800 jobs, but gets, you know, $1 billion airplane contract or whatever.
You offer up a PR deal.
Yeah.
And in return, you get.
Well, what was the net? You know, we saved 800 jobs. How much do we give away for all those 800 jobs? And I think that's going to be a very big part of this, because then it's going to go on.
Well, it's crony capitalism, you know, and one of the reasons our country's been so successful in terms of business investment and other things is that we have the rule of law, we have a certain measure of transparency, we have a certain measure of reliability in our courts and in our political system, even though there is, you know, obviously some legalized bribery with PACs. But we are becoming, and I started to realize this, I think 2 years ago, I first used the phrase banana republicans, because I started getting concerned that we were becoming, I've never actually covered South America, but I was in Colombia last month, you know, I visited there on occasion, and our society, our campaign, and now our government is starting to operate more along those lines. And you could say even the Clintons are there's a little bit of a banana republic, Evita quality there too, but more so, I think, in the way the Republicans play the game. And so the rules are changing, the conventions of journalism are in flux, and what concerns me is whether citizens and journalists can adjust and recognize that this is not, you know, just another administration, start to recognize what our real values are. You know, to put in a plug for ProPublica, you know, people are always asking me, what can I do? And I say, well, if you're in New Jersey and you're politically inclined, you can join Blue Wave New Jersey, or if you are interested in supporting quality journalism, you can give nonprofits like ProPublica money. But there needs to be a resistance, and everybody needs to kind of enlist to resist in their own fashion, because this is not an ordinary, you know, Doris Kearns Goodwin said, no ordinary time. And I'm reminded, you know, of my late father, who was 19 at the time of Pearl Harbor, and he was a college student, and he went down and enlisted, like George H.W. Bush. And, you know, he later said to me, would I prefer to spend the next 4 years chasing girls instead of bombing Nazis in a B-24? Yeah, he would have preferred to have chased girls, but not like chase girls in a bad way like now. But democracy was in trouble, and they recognized that democracy was in trouble, and they went and they served. You don't choose the time of your life when you're called upon to serve. Everybody has to make their own kind of commitment about what they're going to do to make sure that we get through this very perilous period. And those of us in our business have particular responsibility. I value straight. And this is where it's really annoying me. I got into a tiff with the editor of the Wall Street Journal about this last week. Because he was saying on Meet the Press, it wasn't that he was saying, the main news out of his comments were that, you know, he didn't think that Trump should be called a liar. And I kind of, in some ways, I understand that, because if you call him liar, liar, pants on fire every day, then when he really tells a true lie, then you debase the currency. You know, so I don't think, for instance, him saying that Muslims were cheering in New Jersey, I didn't think that was a lie. I thought that was something where he believed, he'd seen it on the internet, he believed some conspiracy theory, he was misinformed. But when he said, you know, Hillary Clinton is for abolishing the Second Amendment, he knows that's untrue, that's a lie. So we do need to kind of distinguish between, but that wasn't what I objected to Jerry Baker's comments on. What I really objected to was that he put objectivity at the top of what our value structure is. As if balance and objectivity are number one, and that's what we're in business to do. And at the time that the press was given its protections by the Constitution, was the only industry in the entire country that was enshrined in our Constitution. There was no objective journalism. There was no such thing. That's not what they were protecting. They were protecting an institution that went for truth. Truth, accuracy, then comes fairness, then balance is fourth. Objectivity, which is a phony concept anyway, is probably fifth. It's like way down the list. And somehow we're confused. We've been confused by this kind of even Stevenism. It's infected our idea of what it is to do our jobs. And we have to reconnect. I think ProPublica is great on this, and Bloomberg Politics is very good on it also. Reconnect for going after the truth, even if it really pisses people off, even if we lose access, and even if we're not popular with certain people. Television was horrible in this regard, because ratings were so connected to popularity, but all of a sudden the media started caring whether it was popular. We're not supposed to be popular. Who gives a shit if we're popular? It's not what we're here for. So, and we've kind of like lost sight of this in our business. And if we don't get back on the rail, and I think we're in the process of doing it, it's going to be a worse 4 years even than we're anticipating.
Right. All right. Let's talk first 100 days. What do you guys see as some of the big things that get done? The Republican held Congress, most powerful in 20 years probably. Where do you see action?
Well, I don't want to see action, but I can tell you kind of where we're certainly looking, and so are a lot of other people. As we all remember the Obamacare debate, it took, arguably not only months and months and months, but frankly years and years, because Hillary started that conversation when she was First Lady. And the Republicans seem to be intent on remaking the healthcare system, in the first 100 days. Based on how the complexities of Obamacare, to say that could end badly is understating it. So yeah, we are, we're going to try to keep a very strong eye on that because, ultimately there's an awful lot of influence in play there. If you look at the history of Obamacare, the questions of, for example, how Medicare Part D was handled, how the insurance companies were treated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is all, huge money at stake. And so the notion that this thing is going to be quickly rewritten on the back of an envelope, in the caucus room, is absolutely frightening and clearly an area that I think one needs to pay attention to. Although you're starting to hear this, as the Republicans move off the talking points and into the actual complexities of this, it's interesting how scary it is because they kind of have started and said, well, now we want to keep the promise that no one loses their insurance because that's politically disastrous. We don't want people without pre-existing conditions to not be able to get coverage because that will be, of course, every night in the nightly news there'll be a story about some poor person with cancer who can't get any medicine. So that's a non-starter. Everybody likes the kids on till 26 thing. So then you're going like, okay, so how are you going to do this? But we've got to get rid of the mandate, which is the only thing that forces healthy people into this. And we've got to get rid of the subsidies because that's just wasteful, and that's the only thing that helps us support. So you're going like, okay, guys, this is basically a Republican program that Obama adopted to get through the Congress.
It seems the president's sensing this.
Yeah, and now what?
If you're going to hit it now, what? Yeah.
But I still think they're going to have to show something, right? Politically, I think they made so much of a fuss about repealing Obamacare, and Obamacare is bad, and he says, is it a lie? I don't know. He picks the highest increase in all the states and says, Obamacare and the exchange is up 144% in one state, but he doesn't say that. So I guess if it's up 144%, we gotta fix it, and only I alone can fix it, so what are you alone gonna do?
Yeah, that's not true. The highest is Oklahoma at 75%, but that doesn't include the subsidies. It only takes 50 votes to repeal Obamacare through this arcane reconciliation process, because it only took 50 to enact it in 2010. But it takes 60 votes to replace Obamacare, because it's just the financing mechanisms that under, I won't bore you with the argument details, but under something called the Byrd Rule allows them to repeal it. But so then they're worried about being in the situation where they have the votes to repeal it, but they don't have the votes to replace it, and on their terms. And Obama went to Capitol Hill this week, and he said, don't help them. He said to the Democrats, we're not going to help them. We're going to let them stew in their own juices. When they come, after they repeal it, if they come crying to us, well, help us fix it now. Sorry. So what will they do? And we don't know. It's looking like a game of 52-card pickup, you know. But there's little indications just in the last few days. I saw the word framework in the New York Times. And what that indicated to me was that they'll repeal it, and then they'll have some principles that for replacement that they will issue. But as a practical matter, they will replace Obamacare with Obamacare. And basically, nothing, very little will change for the next 4 years. They've already said it will take 4 years for us to phase in on new ideas. And they don't want to, like, there's stories on CNN about people with black lung disease who voted for Trump. You know, they don't want, there's 2 lines in Obamacare, in the Affordable Care Act, about black lung disease. They don't want that to go away. So they won't issue any of the implementation language, again, the fine print, when they repeal it, that would actually effectively repeal it. And it will be mostly a symbolic repeal. And then they'll get to the hard part of figuring out what to go next. They will not impose a mandate. What they'll do instead is continuity of care. We're really getting into the healthcare mumbo-jumbo here, but that means that they won't fine you for not signing up, but if you let your insurance lapse, you'll be told you're not going to be able to get it again except for a lot more money. And so they're hoping that that will convince people to, you know, it might not increase sign-ups, but it will keep people from just not paying their Obamacare premiums.
Keep the 20 million.
Keep the 20 million.
Work off that.
Yeah.
So will the premiums come down, or will they ever not rise if you don't add more people to this pool?
That's a really good question. I mean, there's so many moving parts. I happened to see Peter Orszag was Obama's budget director last night, and we were getting into this, and we were really getting into the sheep dip on this. And there are other things that can be done that could lead to downward pressure on premiums, and also as the various efficiencies that Obamacare has already provided really kicking in 2015, that in a larger structural sense will put downward pressure on premiums. So there were some very important particular reasons why they went up in the last 18 months.
All right, so we've now established they're not really going to do anything on health care. So what are what are they going to do something on? That one is like a symbol, and I think people will probably get that it's symbolic. So what's the, what trade deal can they do in like week 1?
Well, I do think they are going to. They have a protectionist who's in at USTR, at the Special Trade Reps Office. So I think they will announce that they're going to try to reopen negotiations on NAFTA. I think there's some indication that they might, in the same way, they're going to rename Obamacare Trump Care. They might rename the TPP, the Trump-Pacific Partnership. Go back, renegotiate some things, throw in some, bells and whistles. But as Obama tried to say, and nobody really heard him, that a lot of the idea behind TPP was boxing out China. And we know that Trump doesn't like China, and that he might kind of come around when he's better informed to the idea that there's some real geostrategic interest in having a Trans-Pacific Partnership. And I think the main thing that they'll do is they'll get some kind of a tax bill and deregulation, and they'll roll back a lot of the executive orders, and it'll be bad news for the environment. I don't think they'll kill the Paris Climate Accord, though. That's too hard. That Rex Tillerson wants to do that. Although he could be neutralized very quickly. All that it takes is one. The Secretary of State is in a very vulnerable position in our government, much more so than other cabinet secretaries. He represents the United States. So one tweet from Trump undermining Tillerson, and he's out of business. He can be there for however many years, but his effectiveness is shot if there's even one tweet. Somebody else who's running a big bureaucracy, if there's a defense secretary or whatever, you can play in that sandbox and continue to do your job. But not if you're Secretary of State. So the way Trump does or does not back up the Secretary of State is going to be really interesting.
What's something that Donald Trump really could knock around and shake up for a positive in the country? What's something that is it infrastructure?
It could be infrastructure where he's right that we need to rebuild airports. The problem is his infrastructure plan is horrible, and it's basically a set of tax credits. So it's only for new stuff, for basically or selling off roads to be toll roads. So our whole country would
Explain that, because it's bringing in private companies.
Yeah, private companies to invest, but private companies are not going to invest in rebuilding your sewer system. There's not any money in that. They would invest in rebuilding a road or building a new highway that they then can make money on. There's been a lot of that kind of privatization, but that's just new infrastructure and a lot of third infrastructure, and there's none of that in
Right. The details of his plan, just to be clear, and the things he said on the campaign trail, this may shock you, are null set. That is to say, he argued at one point, and I was just there, I agree with him, LaGuardia Airport is a disgrace. Although they are doing some improvement of it, it is disgraceful that just in New York, one of the great cities of the world, I don't know how many of you New Jersey Transit commuters, never mind, coming into that Penn Station every morning, like as one architectural critic said, the mole poking its head out of the earth. It's scandalous. It's ridiculous. It was beneath us. All right, but this has got nothing to do with his notion of tax credits, which must ultimately be self-sustaining by the ability of the developer to charge fees to the people who use it. Unless the idea is that you should do Penn Station, and everybody who walks through it every day has to pay you a quarter in and out. And unless we're planning that, it's not going to touch LaGuardia, it's not going to touch Penn Station, it's not going to touch 19 other, crumbling bridges. This is all about, as Jonathan says, new infrastructure. But having said that, look, it gets into the mix with Congress. Maybe there is an actual, real infrastructure.
Yeah, and he could get Democratic vote, so he could cut a deal with Schumer because he's not that ideological. There could be some good news on infrastructure. On deregulation, they're going to try to push through something that will kill the Clean Power Plan. That'll probably go through pretty fast. They're going to try to cut the corporate income tax. I think that'll go through pretty fast.
Oh, wait a minute. There is one thing. I've got it. I've hit it. I do believe, just in the Nixon goes to China example, I do think a fair or a reasonably fair tax bill that allows the repatriation of this, billions and billions of dollars offshore, potentially maybe Trump can pull that off. And how many cents on the dollar are going to come to the Treasury, and what's the actual new sort of corporate tax?
So, they tried. The reason Obama didn't want to do that, I think you could argue that maybe should have anyway, but it was done several years ago, and the companies came back, they pocketed their amnesty, and they just went right back overseas. So unless you can figure out a way to keep them in the United States, it's
well, and that is something that we need to do. They're regularizing. We have this crazy system. The United States has the world's highest corporate tax at 35%. The weird thing is, absolutely nobody pays it because they all fool around with it to the point where they basically, jigger it down to where everybody else is taxed.
The big ones don't. The businesses in Montclair are paying.
Yeah, the businesses in Montclair do pay it. But the major, Apple doesn't pay any 35%. And they do that through all these tricks and keeping the stuff offshore. And ultimately, according to all their 10K forms, which is a big corporate filing, if you look at the tax rate of, let's say a European, Japan, whatever, modern industrialized countries, and the tax rate paid by the big companies in America, it all comes out the same, only there's a lot more accountants involved on our side. So I think getting to a fair, sensible, internationally comparable tax system for corporations would probably be, a win-win. It would be a win for America, it would be a win for the companies, and you could repatriate the profits. And that, the Republicans obviously were never going to give Obama that, even if I think he wanted to, because that would have been a great victory for him. That was the whole idea of scorched earth. Do you think, by the way, Jonathan, to ask you a question, do you think that the Democrats will be tempted to say, okay, guys, a word from Mitch McConnell, why don't we spend 4 years just saying no and be resistant to everything?
Well, so there's a big battle going on about that. I don't think the leadership wants to do that. I don't think Schumer is in that place, even though Trump just called him a clown. I think he wants to get some things done, and he can negotiate with Trump. And just because the Republicans did it, that doesn't mean it was good for them.
What about on the Supreme Court nomination?
I don't think there's any way that they can stop it, but they might, if it depends who the nominee is. If he's especially odious, then maybe they can force him to name somebody else. So you could have a fight, but to get, because they need 60 votes on that. And
right now.
Yeah, so the question is whether McConnell would, it's called a nuclear option, whether they changed the rule already on lower court judgeships, so you only need 51, and you only need 51 on confirmable appointees, which is a huge change. It used to be, until the Democrats changed the rules a couple of years ago, you only needed one to stop a nominee. So that's one senator to put a hold on the nomination, and it wasn't going anywhere. And the Democrats got kind of tired of that, and so they changed the rules. The only thing that still requires 60 votes is the Supreme Court nomination. It's the highest court, it's for life, and they want there to be what they call a supermajority for that. I don't think that McConnell will change that, because he's lived under the rules when they disadvantaged him. He knows how quickly things can change, and there's been a real reluctance, because I think there may be some communication between the Hill and the White House. Don't appoint the most right-wing person, appoint somebody who's more likely to be confirmed.
But would the Democrats have the moral high ground to say, you had a moderate, President Obama put up a moderate here?
Yeah.
Somewhat moderate.
A lot of them will argue that. It's interesting to me that Biden, for instance, just told Judy Woodruff the other day that he thought that was a bad idea. Just because they did it to us doesn't mean we should do it to them. 8 members of the Supreme Court. It's not good for the country, and 4 years is a long time to hold out with only 8 members. What scared me is my college roommate made an argument in the Supreme Court last month, and I went down to watch him. He argued really well in the death penalty case. But the most striking part of it was at the end of the argument, it took Justice Ginsburg about 5 minutes to walk off the bench. She was rather feeble. Her mind was fantastic when she was asking the attorneys questions. You had to struggle to hear her, and I just hope she stays healthy. Because two justices were able to really change things in a good way.
Let's talk about the Republican Party. There seems to be a kumbaya moment right now, but there's some serious fracture points, mostly having to do a lot with money. Some of the deficit projections for Trump have what he would be spending in the trillions of dollars of growing deficit. Do you see an inevitable clash coming?
Absolutely. Although I think the interesting question for the Republican Party is, what does it mean to be a Republican? What does that even mean anymore? And, I used to feel like I could sort of set my compass to understand that question by picking up the Wall Street Journal editorial page every morning and reading what Paul Gigot had to say and then I could understand. So if you're a Republican, you're in favor of free markets and free trade. You're basically in favor of free open immigration policy. You want smaller government. You want government spending to go down, not up. You know, and you kind of look at this new strain that Trump has tapped into, and it doesn't agree with any of these things. You know, the sort of central thrust of the Congressional Republican Party remains very much in line with what Paul Gigot would say, and then you have these insurgents, and some of whom are elected, particularly in the House, who have a very different viewpoint. So then you do find yourself, I will admit, I have to be honest here, I said a sentence about a month ago that I thought I would never say. It was after the carrier deal. You know, Trump had intervened to use his power to get 800 jobs or whatever it is, maybe 500, maybe none, but some number of jobs reportedly saved, and he had basically muscled this company. And Sarah Palin had a series of tweets that said, this isn't how we do it. We have a free market. You can't tell companies where jobs should be. The economic decisions, you know, in our system and in our country and in our party should be made by profit-maximizing corporations. And I turned to my wife and I said, Sarah Palin has it exactly right. That was a sentence I thought I would never speak. So I don't know.
I don't agree with Palin on that either. I kind of like the shaming function. The problem is I don't trust the person who's doing the shaming. So if it was done in a very limited way, like when JFK tongue-lashed the steel company when they raised steel prices, and Harry Truman had some run-ins when there was a rail strike or a trucker strike in the late 40s. And, you know, when the president's going after industries and shaming them, you start going after individual companies. It's a little bit like what the Constitution bars when it comes to individuals. Like Congress can't pass a bill against a person, called a bill of attainder, and it's prohibited by the Constitution. And so it scares me a little bit, like a lot of things Trump does in terms of our basic traditions. But I sort of like the shaming function on some level. I think it's obviously very politically popular, and I also like the fact that Trump isn't for business down the line. You know, this is why he got elected, because he was willing to, you know, be critical of some of what American business was doing, and there could be a little bit of that. Only Nixon could go to China, only Trump can hold business accountable for certain things. But that's assuming that he's operating with a full deck. This is the question right now, and a lot of Republicans are asking. I mean, who sends out a Christmas card just with that? No family? Like, where's? I mean, it's just there's so many weird things about the way he rolls and his level of insecurity, you know, and his to call him an egotist doesn't begin to do justice, as all of you know. So the real question in Washington is people are just kind of like, who is this guy? Is he? And I don't think it's going to take long for a lot of different Republican factions to develop. When you're the governing party anyway, it's impossible to stay unified. The Democrats have a much easier time staying together. Republicans will fragment in many different ways. And I don't think it's at all clear that the old base, as they called it, which had a lot of power and they could scare people with primary challenges, those kinds of candidates that were scaring everybody, they all lost to Trump. You know, so suddenly that's kind of yesterday's news that, you know, they're in danger of getting attacked by somebody from the right in the next primary. And I also think you do have a small group of principled conservatives who went into politics for principled reasons and are not going to be intimidated by Trump, especially if they just got 6 years.
I was going to say John McCain, principled and reelected. So.
I think where the rubber meets the road for a lot of these guys is going to be something we alluded to earlier, which is you do, to some extent, believe in this as a matter of sort of doctrine and religion. If you create a tax code that cuts so much revenue, as they seem bent on doing, and then you don't sort of balance that out with sort of savage draconian cuts, and therefore you're now attempting to have a fiscal policy which is pretty inflationary, and you're borrowing to make it all work because you believe there's going to be 4% growth in a couple of years and it's all going to be taken care of. I just wonder how that's going to play out among Republicans in Washington. That feels very uncomfortable.
Well, the thing is, you got to remember what Dick Cheney said in 2001. It was before 9/11 when they were going over the first budget. Deficits don't matter, quote unquote. So Republicans only care about deficits when Democrats are in power. Otherwise, they don't care. They have no evidence of prescription drug benefit that Bush put through. They didn't pay for that. The Republicans were totally irresponsible. You know, they were what they call pay-fors. Huge new government program, prescription drug benefit for Medicare. No pay-fors. All goes to the deficit. The Democrats come in and do Obamacare. They pay for every penny to tell you where the money's going to come from. But so now I think they'll be very inflationary. They will try to ram through the Ryan budget that slashes discretionary spending on, in all sorts of ways. But that is much easier said than done, because nowadays, look how fast the other night people mobilized when it looked like the Republicans were going to, basically gut this ethics committee.
Mitch Arbiter was gut the toothless ethics
committee.
Yeah,
it was like less than 12 hours. By the time Trump weighed in the following morning, there were already hundreds of thousands, millions of tweets, communications. The public wasn't going to put up with this. And so if the Ryan budget is full of all kinds of really unpopular cuts, and they're not of like 5 or 10%, they're like 40, 50% cuts in very popular programs, and people can mobilize a lot faster than they used to be able to.
So let's look backwards just for a beat. Why did Trump win? What did he appeal to? What did people see there? The media.
I'll give a straight answer, and then you can. Seriously, I think first of all, I think this is a multifaceted election, which will be 100 years from now. Historians will be arguing about this, and there will be revisionist histories and new thoughts. And I think that you can see a lot of different things. But I would make this argument: in general, if one party has held the White House for 2 terms, the country hungers for change. And so if you look at this as a change election in the making, where we have, on the one hand, the sort of sight of very wealthy people doing better and better and better, a minority, and then a majority of people suffering under various things, the question that arose, I think, for people was, who is most likely to change the status quo? And the people who voted for Trump, there's 65 million of them, I think to see them all as knuckle-dragging, racist idiots is to miss the point. I think there are, to be sure, a percentage of knuckle-dragging, racist idiots who cast their votes for Trump. Let's not kid ourselves. But I think that a number of people who voted for him because they wanted to change, and they voted for him in spite of the tape, and in spite of his obvious ADD, and in spite of 10 other things we don't have to go through all again. And, Hillary's argument, you did ask not to mention it, but I think it's worth bringing up. I'm not quite like Jonathan, a sort of very seasoned political reporter. I actually did most of my political reporting overseas when I was a correspondent covering the new democracies in Eastern Europe. And I sort of evolved this test, which is finish this sentence. Vote for me because. And I had this candidate I covered in Poland who should have won an election but actually was clobbered. And his basic argument, when you boil it down, was vote for me because I'm smarter than you. Voters didn't buy it. They didn't like that. They found Lech Wałęsa, who was kind of, in some ways, a Trumpian figure, a far more attractive candidate. And I think Trump said, vote for me. I'm smart enough and tough enough and familiar enough with the system, hell, I was benefiting from it, to blow it up. I'm not going to change much, and I'm a lot better than that other guy. And I think that when people weighed that and they wanted change, vote for me, I'm not going to change much, and the other guy's a jerk, was not as resonant. Now, unless we forget, because of our clock-making system, you know, she did win 2.9 million more votes. So, I mean, this phrase "won the election" is, to me, slightly odd.
So I totally agree with all that, and I think it was summarized best by a guy in the White House I talked to. The Democrats did a focus group after the election, and one of the things they found was that the people in the focus group who voted for Trump, they had a pretty simple message. They hated both candidates, but if they had to choose between an outsider they hated and an insider they hated, they take the outsider they hated. And so this is a guy who, you know, is able to use this argument that he's too rich to be bought, which I always thought was a much more potent argument than the press recognized. People are very suspicious of who's behind the politicians. So if you're rich, you have an advantage because they think that you're less corruptible. I think you have a very powerful message on political correctness. People are tired of walking around on tenterhooks. We have a lot of it here in Montclair. You know, and you can see when people like, oh my God, did I say the right thing or wrong thing, or offend somebody, and
That's a microaggression.
people are getting tired of that. They're getting real tired of it. And so we played into that. And then I thought that his best line in the whole campaign was, "I love the poorly educated." Which everybody laughed at. Trump loved the poorly educated. A lot of people didn't. You know, we find high school graduation is at an all-time high in this country. It's one of the things Obama is pointing to as part of this legacy. People are up. In his administration, it's at 80%. So that still leaves 20% who don't graduate from high school, and what is it? At least 50% who don't graduate from college, any kind of college. So, you know, a lot of them are smart, decent people. They did not get the education that maybe they hoped for, either because they couldn't afford it or they're a little annoyed at themselves because when they were younger they were not as responsible and they didn't do the right thing. And somebody's saying to them, "I got your back. I'm looking out for you." You know, and by the way, what you did is not all your fault. It's some of these other people's fault. It's their fault, not yours. Which is always a very powerful message. If you're not doing so well in life, blame somebody else. And so that just mainlines into what people were thinking. And I can't say that I was smart enough to think that Trump was going to win, but I was worried about him winning almost the whole time because the structure of the election was unfavorable to her. And also, experience. It's a terrible message. I remember covering the first campaign I really covered as a student. It was 1976, and there was a senator named Birch Bayh in Indiana, and he ran on experience. He finished 6th in the New Hampshire primary. And, you know, it just doesn't sell. And the other thing that's more personal experience is my late mother was a politician in Illinois, and she ran statewide in 1976 for Lieutenant Governor of Illinois. And she had a very good reputation, and she ran a really good campaign, and she had a lot of women working on her campaign, and she lost, and it wasn't even very close. And, you know, I learned then, people will not vote for a woman because she's a woman, even if they like her. It's just not the way voters are built. And so this idea that somehow we're going to do all of these people who otherwise were Republicans who were going to vote for Hillary Clinton because she was a woman, it was just never material.
We did a focus group back in July 2015 with Republicans in New Hampshire, and the middle class voters. I never heard one woman said, "He's a billionaire, but he's one of us." And at the moment, we all sort of turn our heads and say, "What did she just say? How is that possible that somebody living in Trump Tower, who's a billionaire, TV shows, could be seen by them as one of them, has their back?"
Because of the showman, that, you know, and the reality show part of it was really important, and people weren't ready to see the reality show canceled. He's a poor person's idea of what a rich person is, or what they would like to do if they were rich. You know, is have all the gold and everything, and all the homes, and so there's a wishful fulfillment thing. What I missed was that all the character stuff would ultimately sink him because people who would send their kids away from the table or wash their kids' mouth out with soap were voting for somebody who had said the same kind of
Worse.
or worse. You know, behavior. This is what I couldn't get over why so many older people voted for Trump. If he hadn't done as well with seniors, he wouldn't have won. You know, he was just killing it with older people who you would have thought would have found this behavior just beyond the pale, and somehow didn't. I don't know.
I don't like this about him, but I like a lot of that.
And I think a lot of them came down. They just wanted their taxes cut, and they just they looked at it in a very.
I don't think it.
Yeah.
Is there a piece that you wish you had written, or you wish someone had written now in hindsight?
Well, I mean, we, ProPublica, did do some work, in-depth work in the Rust Belt, but I think in retrospect, clearly, because the election was, that was the battleground, right? I think a lot more sort of writing and thinking about what was happening there would have been useful, because I think, you know, in the history of the Clinton campaign, as John, I'm sure you're more, you know, in touch with it than I am, but my memory is, I mean, they basically didn't, you know, sound the alarm about Michigan until like the last 48 or 96 seconds. To me, that's
It's really, I mean, I don't know whether we look at the story, but the most alarming thing out of that campaign is that in a close to $1 billion campaign, they didn't spend $2 million at the end doing state polling. The national polls were pretty accurate, but they weren't out in the states, and the state polls in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania were just, first of all, they stopped polling, and the Franklin and Marshall poll, a very reputable poll in Pennsylvania, their last poll was October 30th.
yeah.
You know, so they, which I thought was kind of crazy, but they were not in the field, and things often change in the last week of the election. If the election had been on November 2nd, Hillary would have won. And so things were in flux, not just because of Comey, but I think because the Democrats didn't close the way they usually do on the economy. They didn't get people focused on who's better for the middle class. They sort of lost sight of what had always been their closing argument, and they closed instead on character, which I understand why Hillary went strong on character. It was the right decision, but at the end they should have come back and said, we are, at the end of the day, we are the party of the people and of the middle class. And if they hadn't lost all those middle class voters, you know, they just couldn't win with just the Obama, what they call the Obama coalition, because the main reason that they lost is the rural counties. You know, Trump is bragging about all these counties he carried, and he's right. It's a new reality of American politics. The Republicans win over 90% of American counties, and they did when Obama won. The difference was Obama lost those counties like 65-35, not those small rural counties. They add up, and in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Barely enough. We can take some questions. I know this.
Yeah.
I see a
Big bag coming out.
While it's coming up, I will just note one other thing relevant to what Jonathan just said, which is we do have this phenomenon, and I wish more had been written about it, about the sort of so-called fake news, real news, and the extent, more even significantly, that the internet now allows you to live in a bubble entirely of your own making. And I do think you know, that is something that all of us in the news media will be thinking a lot about, you know, in the coming years, which is how do we reach people who really don't know the answer, so to say, right? How do we, I don't believe that the country is now separated into blue and red bubbles and, you know, never the twain will meet. It is clear that on both the blue and the red sides, there are people who will never change their mind no matter what you write. But I believe, maybe I'm wrong, I believe there is what I call the convincible middle. I don't know what percentage that is, but you don't need very many. We're talking 75,000 people who put Trump in the White House. So, you know, I think there are millions of people who can be convinced, but we are segregating as a country where we get our information, and I think that is a very serious thing for democracy.
Very scary, and I think people in blue states need to start to communicate with people in red states, build connections, which is not that hard to do, to start talking to each other more. And I really do think we have to rethink some of our conventions. Like, just because the president says it doesn't make it news. It's what he does. I'm not saying don't report on the tweets, but there's this ingrained sense that if everything he says is, if it's sexy enough, is what the real news is.
That's a recalibration, right?
Yeah.
It's a recalibration.
All right, we're into the bag.
All right, this is going to be exciting. What do we got?
Okay. Can you name 3 positive things / outcomes you see in Trump's first 100 days?
All right, well, we sort of covered that.
Infrastructure could be a positive.
Infrastructure, absolutely. A tax bill that could potentially result in repatriation of all that money overseas. I think that's something.
Crack down on lobbyists.
Drain the swamp would be good if it happens.
Yeah, I'll see that.
Term limits not happening.
No.
Not happening.
It's possible that you could get something in, like General Mattis, who's going to be the Secretary of Defense, is against torture.
Right.
So, you could see him convincing Trump not going to change our policy on torture. That would be positive.
Okay. I think that was 3.
2.5 anyway. All right, what do we got?
All right. How do we hold Trump's feet to the fire? And don't just talk about the press, talk about citizens too. You talked a little bit about that.
I mean, because I'm paid for my opinions, I don't have any function about saying this, and I think that people need to go out and organize, and that there's a lot of hand-wringing that's going on. So what do I do when somebody may tell me how to help, and that's just not the way the world works anymore. There's many organizations that are doing all kinds of good work, some of them like ProPublica, Journalistic Front, Planned Parenthood. I saw this morning, I saw the head of Planned Parenthood at MSNBC. She's in a fight for her organization, and they need help, and it's hanging by just a couple of votes. And there are many other struggles depending on what one is interested in. People are stepping up, supporting environmental groups. I know you guys have been getting more donations, and so things are happening. But I guess I think it's one of those situations where everybody has to decide what they can do. So if you're a journalist, we know what we have to do. We have to go out and get these stories and tell them in a way that holds people accountable. But it's not just journalists who have to stay vigilant. And I do believe that citizen is the highest calling still.
We'll go rapid fire. I've got more here. All right. This one's from a 6th grader. What will happen to public schools?
A great question. Certainly, if you listen to the new Secretary of Education, you would believe that there, is a threat to the public education system, that the federal government now favors, a much larger ability to pay for schools with vouchers, which could take the money from the public schools and send them toward the private schools. The good news on this, though, is that the Secretary of Education, frankly, has precious little to say about education in America. Education is and remains in America a local matter, so I don't think that we're going to be able to, I don't think we're going to see sort of a sort of massive defunding of public education, though God knows she'd like to. That would be a great dream. The other interesting thing, which I don't know, because we got sort of caught up again, sometimes you feel like you're living in the mirror universe. Certainly when I was a younger person, when I was in elementary school, it seemed to me Republicans stood for standards and rigor. And somewhere in the last few years, the notion of a core curriculum has become an anti-Republican notion, so I guess that means the core curriculum goes down, right? So there'll be no core curriculum.
Well, Betsy DeVos actually for the Common Core, but
Trump's against it.
King of all panderers, right? So somebody told him Common Core bad, so they started saying that and stuff up the votes. So,
So
yeah,
maybe
they
that,
won't,
so I
they
don't know.
won't support it. But, you know, the Common Core is also not a federal thing. It was done by the National Governors Association. So, and in certain areas it's working well, in other areas it's been horribly implemented, it's unpopular. It's not any one thing, as I can already know. What I think she'll be successful in doing, I don't think they're going to be able to voucherize. Vouchers are not politically popular, but charter schools are popular, and charter schools are public schools. And you know, I get into arguments about this with people all the time because I'm more, I guess, conservative on this issue. But I think she will be successful in building on some of what Arne Duncan and John King did in providing some more what they call Title I money. That's the federal money that goes to schools. More Title I money for charters, which are public schools.
All right, so she still has to be confirmed. This question sort of speaks to that. Can the cabinet nominees be legally confirmed before background checks are completed?
Sure, absolutely. Is that
It will be.
It will be. Is that a good idea? No. But I mean, you know, the confirmable candidates in the Senate are people who get 51 votes. So that's
It's a good idea for you because there'd be a lot more Pulitzer Prizes in finding out the various conflicts of interest.
Yes. You laugh, but actually it's extremely helpful.
All right. Looking for a positive point here. How do we not feel totally despondent? I have a 22-year-old who continues to break down in tears.
So I would recommend that people read the news about Richard Nixon. So he basically committed treason in the fall of 1968 by, his fingerprints are now on it with these new documents that came up, by convincing the South Vietnamese to not go along with Lyndon Johnson on moving toward peace in Vietnam, which would have elected his opponent, Hubert Humphrey. So he was, you know, violating the Logan Act, which prohibits this, and engaged in treason. And then, you know, he over the next 5 years, he almost every day did something to subvert the Constitution, and we somehow survived it. So I guess I would say, and you know, I know a lot of people are very upset that we will survive it, but it is people who were older than I was at the time of Nixon think this is worse for a lot of different reasons, and it will take a lot of vigilance. But even kids can do things, and the real thing that needs to happen is just basic education. Kids learn the most from other kids. You know, so if your kids get engaged and then they tell other kids, hey, this is right, this is not the way we do things in this country. And by the way, just because you're president doesn't mean you're not a bully. And by the way, let's not just say the president's tweeting, let's say the president is issuing another bully tweet, or finding various ways, frames, ways of seeing what's going on. And when it's labeled as something that Trump does brilliantly, and his critics need to get in the game, he's great at labeling. A lot of politics is about the art of stigmatization, or, as Nixon said, the mobilization of resentments. Well, if people resent Trump, they need to mobilize those resentments, and that can be done starting when they're in 4th grade.
In New Jersey, charity care funding for hospitals is no longer provided in the New Jersey budget. Has anyone assessed the impact of New Jersey hospitals when people lose health insurance? So, hospitals got on board with Obamacare. Insurance companies got on board with Obamacare.
Well, this comes back to that central point again, and you know, I have to believe that both for political reasons and maybe because it's one of the very few sort of core principles, Trump has repeatedly said, we are not going to let sick people fall over and die in the street. I mean, he has said this. And so I'm not sure his understanding of the charity care issues goes, you know, in New Jersey or anywhere else, goes to how that all plays out. But at some point, you have to get into that. I mean, you're, you know, and this business, Jonathan, that you mentioned, which is to say, okay, you know, we're gonna punish you if you get off insurance, if that's really the way they're gonna go. That has absolutely nothing to do with people who don't have it, right? So, I mean, what do we do with the people who, you know, never bought it in the first place, of whom there are literally still tens of millions, and so they're not in, and they get cancer? What are we going to do then?
Well, I mean, the only sort of semi-encouraging thing, maybe not encouraging, but there are a lot of hospitals in a lot of Republican districts, and they are not voiceless, they're a powerful lobby.
Yep.
And this thing, you know, will play out in different ways in different states. The states I feel sorry for are the red states that didn't take Medicare expansion, which is basically just free money for people in that state, and for ideological reasons, certain idiotic governors didn't take it. Others did, you know, like John Kasich took it in Ohio. Mike Pence sort of took it, and he figured out a way of, actually in some ways, the Times had a good story about this, making some changes that made Obamacare work a little bit better, differently in Indiana, that were not so bad. And so you might see a lot of variation in the way states adapt.
All right. How is someone like myself, not politically involved, work to stand up for fundamental rights and policies Trump is going to work against? So someone like myself is not politically involved. How does that person?
Well, it doesn't require necessarily like working for a candidate to say, go to the ACLU website and find out, well, what are they going to do to try to protect constitutional rights, or go to the ProPublica website, see what sort of stuff they're doing, and then go to Bloomberg Politics and find out more about what's going on. Because I guess my initial reaction, not to be critical of the questioner, but you know, if not get involved in politics directly, and maybe the person's too busy, at least devote a certain amount of time. The fact that they came tonight is a good indication. Devote a certain amount of time to going out and getting more educated about what's going on.
Well, this thing that we alluded to a moment ago about the House Ethics Office, you know, on one sense, when that was voted, you know, we had this moment where I thought, oh my God, Washington is a place where, as Trump is kicking over the norms and saying, you know, criticize the Gold Star family, why not? You know, be a draft dodger and tell John McCain his time in the Hanoi Hilton isn't worth anything because he was captured. You can say anything, all the norms are gone. And then the House leadership said, this is great, the norms are gone. We can just announce that, I mean, I don't know how many people read what they actually said. It was really an astounding document. It was passed in secret. The people who voted for it was not recorded, right? And it said things like, if any anonymous material comes to the ethics office implicating a member of the House in wrongdoing, we will refuse it. I thought, wow. I said, how about you say, send it to ProPublica.org? Put a forwarding thing on that guy. Send it to us. I mean, they literally said, if there's a crime, we here at the House will not be making any referrals to prosecutors because that would cause problems for our members. You read this document going, oh my God. But look what happened. As John pointed out, you then had people who, political involvement, some substance of it was to pick up the phone and say, I just want to call and say, I'm Steve Engelberg of Montclair. That's a frickin' outrage. And,
Were you surprised by the response? Were you surprised by the response?
I was surprised.
I was really surprised because I read the Times article online, you know, that night, the night before, and
It was a holiday. I mean, it was
Yeah.
for most people.
yeah, and I kind of tweeted on it and thought, well, look, this is just the opening shot.
Here we go.
Here we go. This is the way it's going to be from now on. So I was really surprised.
But what's interesting is that members of Congress, apparently, when they get flooded, when their switchboard is flooded with phone calls from very angry constituents, have a reaction. And, you know, what we were going to do, this didn't materialize, but I believe these opportunities will materialize. We were actually going to do a thing on Twitter where we were going to ask people in districts of all the Republicans to call the office and ask demand to know how their guy voted. We were going to create a social media story, which we would then create a grid of, you know, so-and-so says he voted for it, so-and-so, we refuse to tell his constituents how he voted, so-and-so says he voted no. And, you know, we've actually done this before. So, you know, it might be something as simple as just joining in an effort like that, you know. Call your congressman office and say, I want to know how you voted. I want to
going to, I mean, the Tea Party, you know, which has become there's a new organization called Indivisible that was started by some former Democratic staffers, and their model is the Tea Party, which was not a centrally run thing. It was a series of different organizations. But one thing they had in common was they went to these town meetings in the summer of 2009. They showed up. And normally, like a congressman will go to a town meeting, and the attendance would be like smaller than it is tonight. There won't be very many people there. And so the people who show up, and you don't necessarily have to live in the same district. If you go to Rodney Freeman-Eisen's district, you show up. You know, but this is just. Democrats, I think, got very kind of complacent. And it's understandable in some ways why they did, but I think they're waking up.
I think there's a few minutes left, but this was an interesting one, picking up on a theme that, Jonathan, you were talking about. Using the example of Trump protesting the cost of the F-35 and the next Air Force One, isn't it possible that Trump may shame the ever-increasing cost of medicines and healthcare in general?
That could be a good part of the Trump,
use the bullet point, use the tweets, use the...
If he does that, the problem is he does it in a mindless way. So there are, you know, so you can't just say it costs too much. You know, Air Force 2 costs too much. And if it's already in the pipeline, you have to have sophisticated understanding of the way government works. You have to have the interest in detail to be able to maybe follow up on your tweet. You know, when Eisenhower became president, he said the biggest thing that surprised him was when he was in the military, if he gave an order, you know, people followed the order and something happened. And as president, even at a time when he had immense stature, much more popularity than Trump does, he would say something and nothing would happen. And Trump is going to start finding that he's going to get really frustrated because he's going to tweet that, you know, something should happen and it won't happen. How is he going to react then? Probably not well. So you have to have a certain kind of sophistication about how government works to actually crack down on something like the F-35.
Okay. What would you say are the responsibilities of the press in a post-Trumpian world where facts are dismissed as opinions? We fit this a couple different ways.
I mean, first of all, it's not entirely universal, although there's certainly more of it now than there's been. I think I saw some public opinion poll that indicated that 60% of Trump voters believe that Obama was born in Kenya. So, you know, clearly, no matter how many times people say it, even if Trump says it, people still believe it. I think the responsibility of the press is clear, and we do have an opportunity here, publishing as we all do now on the internet, and we do this in ProPublica a lot. You can write a sentence, and you can write a story, and you can include with it links to the documentation. You can show people videos. You can show people the original documents. You can show people where your material comes from. So I think, you know, we're talking about the question of objective or not objective. I think the first duty of the press is to be factual and to be, at this point, because we can be and we should be, transparent about how you get your facts.
What about with so much of the press being in the business now for profit? Is it possible to re-engineer the way newsrooms are set up, bureaus are set up, to actually get back to what needs to be done in order to hold someone like President Kennedy?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's not necessarily clear to me that, misleading people equates to clicks, right? I mean, you could have a completely factual story with the right headline on it that would get a lot of clicks, or you could have a completely unfactual story with a dumb headline on it that wouldn't get a lot of clicks. I mean, I think that's a false choice. It seems to me, there are plenty of for-profit operations right now which are making money. The Washington Post is quite factual, and it seems to have, with the help of Bezos' investment and some tinkering under the hood of their website, found a way to make some money at this. The Washington Post, you know, although it's now announced they're going to hire like 60 or 70 additional reporters, which in a field that has sort of shrunk massively, the notion that a national publication is out there with enough money to hire 60, 70 new people is pretty amazing. So I don't think the choice is make money, be profitable, and therefore, you know, mislead the readers. I think there's a different way to.
I'm really happy about that, but you know, it's a nonprofit. It's Jeff Bezos' nonprofit that's doing it, and the basic structural problem at this time in journalistic history is that talk is cheap and reporting is expensive. So it's very easy to get, you know, you don't have to pay me and other people very much money to go yak, yak, yak on MSNBC. If they wanted to send me to Syria, that would cost a lot of money. If they wanted to, you know, let me loose for 2 months to try to find something out about Trump and the Russians, that's a lot of money. Now,
May not turn up anything.
Yeah.
Right, might be drilling dry holes. Right, so what news organizations I think have to get, and I do think that Bloomberg is one of those that does get this, is that ultimately the public is so saturated with opinion that the facts, a good story that's new actually does break through, and you can get a better return on your investment than you can.
It's actually something.
Because it's
David
something.
Fairmount.
David Fairmount from the Washington Post would be a good example. I'm sure he drove a fair amount of traffic to the Washington Post because he was writing new stuff, and other people did as well. There was some very good journalism.
We should always point out, David Fairmount was the guy that wrote about the Trump Foundation, broke a lot of stories about that. This prompted somebody somewhere in the universe to believe that when they had a tape of Mr. Trump's locker room banter, that the best person it should be sent to was one David Fairmount. It appeared first on the Washington Post website, and I believe it was, in fact, the most traffic story in the history of the Washington Post.
So they asked him, how did you break the story? He said, well, I just called up the people that the foundation said on their website they gave the money to, and asked them, did you get the money?
Yeah.
It was great instinct.
Yeah, and he did a lot of other, I mean, some of it was very meticulous reporting, but I do think that there's responsibility on the consumer as well. I covered the media for Newsweek for a long time in the 80s and early 90s. And people would always say, sort of, why isn't the media telling us this, telling us that? And at that time, it was a fairly legitimate gripe because, you know, there was Time, Newsweek, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, USA Today. There were like only 6 or 10 sources of real information, wire services. Now, if you're not informed, not to put too fine a point on it, it's your own damn fault. Because it's out there to get. And so some of the best news that I've had that makes me feel a little bit better, there's two pieces of good news since the election. I'm not saying that I'm not still really agitated about what's going to happen on January 20th, but one was that subscriptions to the New York Times and the Washington Post are up sharply. Trump said otherwise. He's lying about that. ProPublica is getting more money. Not enough, but they're beginning to be subsidizing through the ACLU for various organizations. So people are stepping up. And then the other thing, there was a story that I read in the Times that Jerry Brown and a lot of other people in California, they don't care what Trump does on the environment because they're going to do their own thing. They're going to stay on course. They have the levers to do it. And keep moving toward a clean, green future. And other big states, even not Texas, well, actually, Texas has a huge amount of wind power. So not everything has to be determined from Washington. People can do a lot in their states and localities to make things better, even if things are going
Well, if an automaker wants to sell in California, they got to meet that standard. Therefore, why not make all their cars so that's
Right.
So there's a right. We have time for one more. All right, let's make it a yes or no. Will Trump be reelected?